So I'll leave you with 3 words and a thought. I'm supporting Bernie Sanders because of his commitment to causes which are just, his leadership, always speaking out, never bowing to pressure, never licking his finger and seeing which way the wind is blowing, and his commitment to opportunity. And let me just talk about that for one moment, and then I'll get out of the way and let you listen to who you came to hear. This has been a big week. We've heard a lot about equality, especially in the last 24 hours. But I think we all know that equality under the law doesn't mean much without equality of opportunity. And that's an incredibly important distinction. And that, at the end of the day, is what this campaign and this movement is about. There is a great new equality in this land, but there is still a huge inequality in terms of concentration of wealth, economic opportunity, educational opportunity. And Senator Sanders is, without a doubt, the best person to speak to that and to help us make some progress. So without further ado, I give you our future Democratic nominee and President of the United States, Bernie Sanders.
Ron, thank you very much. Meredith, thank you very much. Sydney, thank you very much. If you think you're going to be off the hook the day after the election, you are sorely mistaken. Because nothing will get accomplished unless millions of people are actively involved in the political process. Now, what I have done in my political career in Vermont, what we're doing in this election, is doing it differently again than most candidates. We don't start from the top on down. I don't have a super PAC. I don't have an enormous amount of establishment support. But what we are doing is getting many hundreds of thousands of people in every state in this country signing up to be actively involved in the political process. What we are doing is not having meetings with 100 people where folks are contributing $50,000 or $1 million to a super PAC. We're not doing that. We don't have a super PAC. We're not going to have a super PAC. But this is what we have done, which I think is pretty extraordinary. As of today, we already have some 200,000 Americans who have made individual contributions. How's that? And unlike Jeb Bush Jeb Bush goes to meetings and apparently he has to discourage people from contributing more than $1 million. It becomes embarrassing. Not one of my problems. Our average campaign contribution is $35. How's that? Now the question is, and this question we will see how it plays out because I don't know the answer. Can, in fact, in this day in American history, with Citizens United allowing the Koch brothers and other billionaires to buy elections, can we defeat them with small individual contributions? And you know what?
Yes.
Let's find out. That's the answer. We may not. We may not. Because the money that we have raised from 200,000 people is nothing for the Koch brothers. That's what they spend on breakfast. That's true. That's the reality. I don't know that we can win. But I think, as Ron just said, we're going to give it a try. We're going to see what happens. Now, here's when I talk about grassroots activism and politics that goes from the base on up. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean. As Ron mentioned, all of us are proud, I hope all of us, and I believe all of us in this room, are proud that the Supreme Court every once in a while makes a decision that is right.
Yep.
And this week, actually, they made 2 decisions. Their batting average is pretty bad, but they've improved it a little bit this week. And here's the issue about gay marriage. If anybody thinks that this decision suddenly just popped out and that you had, 6 justices who suddenly were prepared to do the right thing, then you don't understand how politics works. This decision came about because for decades and decades and decades, gay Americans and their allies fought the fight on so many different fronts to end discrimination against gay people. That's what happened. And as a result of their efforts, we ended up having conservative states in America saying yes to gay marriage. Overwhelming majority of young people. I go out to high schools in Vermont and I say to the kids, well, what do you guys think about gay marriage? And they look at me with a blank stare, like, what is the issue? That's true. 10 years ago, that would not have been the case. So we have come a long way. But the point here is that did not happen without the struggle of people at the base. People who put their lives on the line, went to jail, died in some cases, making that fight. We must, in a very bold and aggressive manner, do everything that we can to combat climate change. Now, the good news is that we have many of the tools and we know what to do. And what we have to do is to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. We need to invest heavily. In our part of the world, in New Hampshire and Vermont, you got a lot of older buildings that are just wasting huge amounts of energy. In Vermont, we brought a lot of money into weatherized homes. We have seen a 50% reduction in fossil fuel. That's really good. We should be doing that all over America. We should be transforming our energy system, building up rail to get cars and trucks off the road, making our energy. And clearly, we should be moving to such sustainable energies as wind, solar, geothermal, biomass, and other sustainable energies. And we are. In the last 5 or 6 years, we have seen real progress. I don't know about New Hampshire, I really don't, but drive around Vermont, see a lot of solar now, a lot more than we used to. And we've got, I brought a lot of money in for that, and we're seeing some results. But we have to do that all over this country. And I want to kind of complete the loop here and tell you how campaign finance reform ties into an issue like climate change. Right now, you have the vast majority of the Republicans in the Congress who either deny the reality of climate change or the fact that climate change is caused by human activity. They deny that. Now, I brought an amendment up to deal with that issue on the budget process, and I think we got 5 Republican votes. Okay. Now, why is that? Are the Republicans, do they reject the science on cancer research? No. Diabetes research? No, they don't. Why are they rejecting the science on climate change? Money. Because among others, the Koch brothers, big oil, big coal, basically makes it clear that if they begin to talk about climate change and doing something about it, their funding sources will cease. And that's the tie-in. And you see that in many, many instances. All right. So we have got to, for the sake of our kids and our grandchildren, I've got 7 grandchildren, including 3 who live here in New Hampshire, and 4 beautiful kids. We have got to lead the world, and we can do this. And think of what it means to America in terms of our leadership role, the idealism of young people involved in this process, tapping all of the new sustainable energy technologies, putting people to work, weatherizing homes, be huge and transformative for our country and the world. And by the way, thank God for Pope Francis.
Woo. Yeah.
If you think my views are progressive in terms of economics, read what this guy has to say. Because what he talks about is not only inequality and the dispossessed, the elderly and the children and the young who are pushed outside of the economy. He talks about the idolatry of money. The fact that all over the world people are worshiping money. That our culture says to be wonderful you have to be rich. And the most wonderful of all are the richest of all. And he says that's not what being human is about. Being human is caring for those people around us, especially those people who have the least, not those people who have the most. So he's doing a great job, and it was a very brave thing for the Vatican to come out with this encyclical on climate change, which, by the way, I think will have a huge impact globally as we marshal our forces to combat climate change.
Of Charleston and the atrocities in Colorado and Arizona and here in Connecticut and New England, It is not right for people to own assault rifles. It's not right for regular people. There's no reason for it. So how are you going to stop the NRA?
Good. Well, let me just thank you for asking.
Loaded question.
No, it's not a loaded question. It's an important question. Let me just say a few words on that very important issue, and thank you for asking it. Number one, you were looking at a guy who has a lifetime voting record from the NRA of between D and F. I think it's somewhere around D. Second of all, you're looking at a guy in Vermont. It is not true that in every election that I ran in, the NRA or the gun folks took a position. But in every election that they did take a position, they were supporting my opponent against me, okay? Thirdly, and this is the important point that I want to make, and this is very important. It's important for states like New Hampshire and Vermont and rural states all over this country. So let me be very clear about it. There are, in my state and in your state, tens of thousands of people who own guns, who hunt, who do target practice, and go to antique gun shows. 99.9% of those people are law-abiding people.
Yep.
And I respect, and we should all respect, different lifestyles. That is a lifestyle that I respect. I have seen and been with families, you know, mom, dad, and kids go out into the woods, they enjoy nature, and that is what they do. And they should not be condemned, and they should not be stigmatized. I think, frankly, that I can play a very good role in the debate over gun control for the following reasons. I come from a state which has virtually no gun control at all. None. And so I have to tell you, it took a little bit of courage on my part to vote for a ban on assault weapons.
Woo.
To vote for instant background checks. To vote to end this gun show loophole, all right, which is a very serious problem. I voted for all of those things, and not everybody in my state agreed with me. But here's what I think. I may be wrong, but this is what I think. I think in states like Vermont, New Hampshire, and rural states all over this country, where people do hunt, where people do own guns, what people also understand here and in Vermont is that guns in our part of the world, and in my state, thank God, we have a very low crime rate and relatively few instances of people using guns to kill people. Thank God. But what people in Vermont, and I suspect New Hampshire, understand is that guns in our part of the world are very different than guns in Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. Guns in Chicago mean that young people who are in gangs are killing other young people or shooting at police officers or involved in the drug trade. Very different understanding of guns and reality of guns in those areas than in rural areas. What we have got to do, and I think honestly I'm in a pretty good position to do, is to come forward with a common sense proposal on guns that will have the support of not of everybody, but of a significant majority of the American people. For example, not too many people in America believe that we should allow guns to get into the hands, frankly, of people who should not have them, right?
Yep.
All right? Who disagrees with it? It's hard to disagree with that. You know, we know people who are suicidal, who are homicidal. They should not have guns. People who have criminal records should not have guns. People who have come out of psychiatric institutes should not have guns. I hope and I believe that in America there's not much debate about that. So we need an instant background check. I would hope that that is widely supported. Now, your point about assault weapons, I agree with that also. Hunters, vast majority of hunters, do not use semi-assault weapons when they hunt, all right? They don't need it. And they don't have magazines that can shoot 30 bullets at a time. So I would hope that as a nation, we would ban these types of assault weapons so they don't get into the hands of people who are gun dealers or out shooting at police officers. I would hope that we can agree on that. And I hope that we could agree that it's stupid to have loopholes so that if you went to a gun show, you could buy all the guns you need without a background check. That doesn't make sense. So these, among others, and I'm open to other ideas, but here is the point. People in urban America cannot demonize or stereotype people in rural America because they own guns and they hunt. People in rural America who hunt have got to understand that guns in Chicago and LA mean a very different thing than guns in Vermont and New Hampshire. Yeah. And if we can come to that understanding and cross this cultural divide, we can finally come up with common sense gun solutions that the vast majority of the American people will support. A long answer to a short question, but thank you.
For Senator Sanders, and when they asked me to volunteer to introduce him, they didn't tell me there'd be like 1 million people here. And one more cheer. I will cut this and make this very short. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a true American hero. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders has for over 30 years been the nation's most persistent voice, defending the interests of the working class and standing up to the excesses of corporate America. No one has focused more attention on the critically important issue of the growing gap between the rich and everyone else than Bernie Sanders. It is a great honor. It is a great honor to induce, let me try that. It is a great honor to introduce a man who dedicates his every waking hour to working for people of the middle class. Ladies and gentlemen, U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, the next president of the United States.
I live right here in Henniker. I may have lost count, but I think every topic that you touched on is primarily, my understanding, an Article 1 issue for Congress and not necessarily for the presidency. And with the really hostile environment in Congress now, I wondered if you could speak briefly about how, as president, you'd be able to cut through that.
Good.
Because we've heard that before.
Yes.
The other part of the question is that, speaking of the Constitution, I have a copy of, sesquicentennial copy of the Constitution that 4 years ago Governor Romney promised to sign for me. And after 3 hours of waiting in the cold, he then changed his mind. So
I'll sign it. Your first name was? Your first name?
Scott.
Scott. All right, Scott asked a very important question. Basically, as I understand it, what Scott is saying, look, you got a lot of dysfunction, you got a lot of conflict in Washington, you've brought forth a progressive agenda, how are you going to get through? All right, and let me answer that question in this way. The way we will get this through is when the American people stand up and demand it. That is the only way we're going to get this through. Scott, overwhelmingly, the American people want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The Congress, under Republican leadership, would like to lower the minimum wage. Our job is to bring people together to tell Congress they're going to give them an offer they can't refuse. Either they do what the American people want, or they're going to lose their jobs and join the ranks of the unemployed. question gets back to my very first point that I made. I can't, when people say Bernie, 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 it ain't Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. It is you. We've got to do this together. What goes on in Washington is many of the politicians there who get huge sums of money from the wealthy and the powerful, they assume that the American people know nothing about what's going on. So they can vote against the middle class and working class and then unload on 30-second TV ads and they win elections. And what the political revolution is about is for us to educate the American people and to demand that they stand up for their rights. And if we do that, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Do you think that an aroused mass movement in this country of American working people will tolerate hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks for the top 0.2%? The answer is obviously not. What the American people will demand is a jobs program which creates millions of decent paying jobs. But that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen unless people are organized and educated, and that is what this campaign is about.
My name is Bernie.
Nice sticker you're wearing there.
The question I have has to do with the financial transaction tax.
Yeah.
That Concord Monitor had an editorial.
Yes.
I was that affects high frequency trading.
Yes.
Tax the profit. I did a little research on it though. That's been bouncing around apparently since 2011, and both in the House and the Senate, it's gets attached to other things. I guess my most basic of all basic question is, why can't you just have one thing to be voted upon with no attachment, either yes or no, and you can see who voted yes and who voted no. Thank you.
That's a good question. And I would give you, occasionally that does happen, but often it does not happen. And the reason it does not happen is that the more complicated the legislative process is, the harder it is for the American people to know what's going on. That's not an accident. When I was mayor of a city, what we used to do is say, okay, how much are we going to spend on the streets? All right, let's argue about that. You decide how much and you spend the money. That's not what goes on in Congress. You got an authorization process. You got an appropriations process. We're dealing with the highway bill. You got 3 separate committees dealing with parts of that bill. And I think if your point is that we've got to simplify the situation so the American people know who's voting for what, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Hi, Bernie. I'm Maggie from Claremont, and you touched on a very important subject, and that is the outsourcing of the jobs, the American jobs. So how do we reverse that, Bernie?
We reverse it by reversing our trade policies. Maggie, you're looking at a member of Congress who is in the House, voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, and permanent normal trade relations with China, helping to lead the opposition against this TPP, which is a continuation of bad trade policies. These bills, without exception, you should know this, they're written by major multinational corporations. Their goal is pretty simple. Why do they want to pay you $20 an hour when they can go to China or Vietnam and pay people 60 or 70 cents an hour and then bring their product back in America? Ain't much more complicated than that, really. All right? What we need to do, and we can do that, is develop a trade policy which says, guess what? I know it's a radical idea, but our trade policy will work for the American worker and poor people around the world, and not just the CEOs of large corporations. We can do that. We can devise those trade policies, but you can't devise them when they're written by the corporate world, they're written by Wall Street, and they're written by the pharmaceutical industry.
Hi, my name is Dean. I just drove almost 100 miles to hopefully see the next president of the United States. Virtually everything you spoke about tonight could possibly be achieved with some substantial tax reform here in the United States. because incentive is the soul of happiness. What do you think the chances are for substantial tax reform, A, now and when you become president?
The chances for substantial tax reform now are less than nil. Because corporate America and Wall Street and the big money interests run the United States Congress. So you cannot expect anything significant to happen that benefits working families. But we have introduced a number of pieces of progressive tax reform, which will ask the wealthiest people and the large corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes. And what a president can do, and what I will do, is to rally the American people around that agenda. We will put it right on the table, and we'll see who's going to vote for it or not.
I'm Mark from Peterborough, and I just have a quick question about the mass incarceration of young black people, which is the largest in the world. And it's gotten more. I think this is what is scaring a lot of white people from the wonderful ideas that you mentioned. Everything you said, I thought today was correct. But so many people are frightened because they feel that the police arrested black people, that's okay, but not white people. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I'm not sure that I agree with the essence of your question in this instance. Let me thank you for raising a very important issue. And we all have got to deal with this issue. And here's the issue. In the United States of America today, we have more people in jail than the people of any other country. China is a communist, authoritarian country, 4 times our size. We have more people in jail than China has. What we have got to do is to make some very fundamental changes in our criminal justice system. We have to rethink the war on drugs, for example.
Yes.
Let me pick up on your point. People have differences of opinion on the statistics, but what people are saying is that today, if a young black male is born today, that baby stands a 1 in 4 chance of ending up in jail. That is a horrendous American tragedy. And that tells me why we have got to invest in jobs, we've got to invest in education, we have got to reform our police departments around this country. And what we have got to do is save a generation.
And I'm pregnant with a little girl. I'm excited about.
Congratulations.
My question is about equal pay for women. I have heard, thank you. It's very important. So I'm curious to know, I've heard you talk about social and economic mobility, but how are you going to address issues related to equal pay to make sure that little baby T grows up, when she has that education that you are promising, she makes the exact same amount as a man who is qualified just like she is?
We are going to pass legislation which ends the disgrace of women making 78 cents on the dollar compared to men. That is a bill that can be passed today, and that is a bill that must be passed.
And I represent what historically was known as the backbone of the American economy. I'm a small business owner, 2nd generation, since 1972. We are becoming extinct. I believe in everything that you support for the American worker. I want to treat my worker and my staff that way. But how do I balance both when I sit next to Walmart, who's paying so much less for the goods that I need to sell?
That's right. Did you all hear the question? I mean, you know, among other things, Walmart, just say a word about Walmart and I'll get to your question. When we talk about the transformation of the American economy, what you should all be appreciative of is that about 30, 35 years ago, the largest employer in America was General Motors. And General Motors obviously makes automobiles, they have a strong union, they pay workers decent wages with decent benefits. Today, the largest employer in America is Walmart. Low wages, minimal benefits, vehemently anti-union. And that is part, I think, what Kathy is your name? Yes. Kathy is talking about is what we call the race to the bottom. And it is very hard to compete against folks who pay such low wages. So what we need to do for a start is tell Walmart, and we're trying to do that they cannot continue to exploit their workers. They cannot continue to buy all of their products or most of their products from abroad. How about buying products made in the United States of America, creating jobs here? What Kathy is saying touches on a huge, huge issue, and that is, it goes beyond Walmart. In industry after industry, starting with Wall Street, you are seeing huge concentrations of ownership, where a handful of huge multinationals control one segment of the economy against the other. And very often it is hard for small business to compete against the advantages of these huge corporations, period. And this is an issue we have to address. So one area that goes beyond your question, Kathy, and we're going to work on it, and I've introduced legislation to do that, is in terms of Wall Street. You have 6 financial institutions that have assets equivalent to 60% of the GDP of America. We're going to try to break these banks up. We need to create a more competitive economy, which is not dominated by the Walmarts of the world.
It's Elizabeth, and I came up with 5 other people from Worcester, Massachusetts.
Woo! Yeah! Woo!
And are Progressive Democrats of America. My question is, where do you stand on foreign policy, Iran, the Middle East, in general?
Okay, good. Question is, where do I stand on foreign policy, which is a pretty broad question. Let me just answer it in this sense. I was elected to the House of Representatives in 1990, November 1990. Early 1991, a few weeks after I took office, I had to cast a vote on the wisdom of going to war in the first Gulf War. I looked at all of the evidence and I said, there are other ways to deal with Saddam Hussein other than going to war. I voted against that war.
Woo!
In 2003, all of the discussion about weapons of mass discussion, and you all remember Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld and President Bush and telling us how we had to invade Iraq and it would last us 5 or 6 months, we'd establish democracy and our troops would come home.
Very pale.
I didn't believe that. And not only did I vote against the war in Iraq, I helped lead the opposition to the war in Iraq. And if you want to go, when you go home, Elizabeth, go to YouTube, look at the speech that I gave during that debate. And it sends chills down my back because sadly, much of what I predicted, in fact, happened. Now, where are we today? We are in an incredibly difficult, complicated, and destabilized world. That's where we're at. And anyone who has a magical solution, boy, I'd love to hear it. So would the president. There is no magical solution. But this is what I get very concerned about. It appears to me that many of my Republican colleagues have not learned the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan. And there seems to be almost no part in the world, no place in the world where they do not want to get us involved in another war. So in terms of a situation such as ISIS, which is a barbaric organization which has got to be defeated, my view is that the Muslim nations in that area, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. Saudi Arabia, as you may or may not know, has the 3rd largest military budget on earth. It is time for them to take the lead and defeat ISIS. You know, I think the president is trying hard. I think we should be supportive of those nations. I think we should work in an international coalition. But I will do everything I can to make sure that the United States is not involved in perpetual warfare in the Middle East.
GMO. We 64 countries across the world have labeling. The United States and Canada are the only two industrialized countries that don't. We have approximately 93% of Democrats want labeling, but only 89% of Republicans want it. But right now we're looking at losing the right to have labeling through the TPP and through the DARK Act. What can we do now to protect labeling, and what will you do as president to get that for us?
Claudia's your name?
Bonnie.
Bonnie, sorry. Wasn't even close, okay. Bonnie, let me tell you what I have done. Several years ago, as part of the, as I recall, the agricultural bill, I introduced legislation that would make sure that states around this country have the right to do GMO labeling, and I'm very proud that my state of Vermont is the first state in the country that does that. I am not here to tell you, that GMOs, foods are going to kill you tomorrow, all that stuff. That's not what I'm saying, but I do believe that the American people have a right to know what is in the food and how that food is produced. And your point is right. All over the world, dozens and dozens of countries provide their consumers with that opportunity. We should have that opportunity as well. All right, we've got to get going, but this is a great turnout. And let me thank you all very much for being here tonight. We have, it seems to me, a responsibility for all of those people who gave up their lives fighting for democracy, fighting to defend democracy, that we hold that banner high, that this country belongs to all of us and not to a handful of extremely wealthy and greedy people. And that is what this campaign is about. And I think we have a message that is resonating not only throughout New Hampshire, it is resonating throughout this country. We can win this thing. They got the money, but we have the people. As I mentioned earlier, the bad news is for you is that not only are you going to have to help me win the election, I'm going to be back the day after the election because we cannot accomplish what we need to accomplish without this strong, active grassroots movement of which you are a part. Thank you all very much.